Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Monday. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I want to first of all say thank you all so much for the continued support that we've had on this channel. I have now recovered from daylight savings time. At least I think so. I now know that today is Monday, and I also am somewhat in tune with the sleep schedule, but we'll see how that goes. I guess I'll keep you guys posted, not that you really care, but I'll let you know if anything changes. But anyway, today's video is really going to be focused on a storyline that I don't think we really have talked about enough. There have been some reports about it in some of the major news media sources, but it's sort of fallen off of the news cycle, and understandably so. There's been a lot in the world that's been happening over the last couple of weeks that have sort of taken the front and center storylines, but there is still something that's pressing going on in both the weather and climatological space, and that is what's happening in New Orleans. New Orleans is currently experiencing an exceptional drought that actually has impacted the Mississippi River, and this has implications beyond just the lowering of the Mississippi water table. It actually extends into the citizens that live in these areas. So I want to start a little bit unconventional for today's video. Take a listen to the latest NPR podcast, which actually talks about this. This was just 5 days ago. The Mississippi River, again, experiencing historically low levels due to drought. So take a listen to this. Whatever your opinions are of NPR, I think this is still a really good piece, and I want you guys to take a listen to it.
For the second year in a row, the Mississippi River is at historically low levels. Once submerged sandbars have resurfaced and shipping has been disrupted. And at the mouth of the Mississippi, the drought has allowed salt water from the Gulf of Mexico to threaten drinking water for Louisiana residents. Here's WWNO's Hallie Parker.
Jamie Taylor pulled plates out of his dishwasher a few weeks ago, only to find they weren't totally clean. They were dotted with dark red spots. He was confused until
I started looking and took the top rack off. The salt water has eaten into and corroded the top rack to where rust is getting on my dishes.
Wow.
Salt water from the Gulf had pushed upstream in late June, inundating the river near where Taylor lives, the southern tip of Plaquemines Parish. It's also where the parish gets its drinking water, so Taylor and others lost clean water and appliances.
If you drive up and down the road, you're going to see hot water heaters sitting by the road because people have had to replace them.
Water heaters, dishwashers, ice makers, washing machines. Many have seen some sort of costly damage. The parish has asked the Biden administration to reimburse residents now that a federal disaster has been declared. They're waiting on an answer. Taylor says even before the salt emergency, their water system was ignored.
We're neglected. Bar none. It's just that simple.
At its worst, parish leaders say the water flowing through people's pipes was 6.5 times saltier than the Environmental Protection Agency recommends. The area was under a health advisory for 4 months. Federal and local officials have brought the emergency under control by fixing another water treatment plant, shipping in fresh water by barge, and installing filters to remove the salt. Mitch Jurasich represents the most affected part of the parish. He says officials have only just begun to assess whether the damage from saltwater corrosion extends past home appliances to the parish's network of water lines and towers. If so, chemicals like lead could leach into the water.
Wow.
I think we're going to see some long-term impacts. Got to definitely prepare ourselves.
Preparing.
Guys, that's the biggest takeaway here. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know the severity of the situation. We look at this from the lens of meteorology, but there's this human element that always has to be acknowledged. And right there, we could be talking about lead in the waters because of what's happening with the corrosion of the pipes, because of that excess salt water. That, of course, it leads to even worse situation of people ingesting this water. A lot of people in these areas, keep in mind, these are poor communities for the most part that live along the Mississippi River and are heavily dependent on this water source. So it's a pretty significant situation.
Preparing is what geology professor Tor Tornquist with Tulane University recommends. He says the saltwater intrusion has been known to happen naturally almost once a decade, but now it's happened 2 years in a row, with this year being worse.
On one hand, we'll have bigger floods, but we will also have bigger droughts. So we will have larger fluctuations on rivers.
And the current big drought has not only threatened drinking water, but shipping across the entire Mississippi River, Tornquist says. It's created a bottleneck at different parts of the river from Memphis, Tennessee to Vicksburg, Mississippi, all the way down through Louisiana. giant ships are struggling to get farmers' crops to global markets.
Great point.
Under extreme drought situations that we kind of have right now, it becomes a real issue for navigation, right? Because the channel depth decreases and we have these really large container ships that have to get as far inland as Baton Rouge.
Ultimately, the ships are waiting for the same thing Louisiana residents like Taylor are: rainfall across the Mississippi River Basin, and a lot of it.
So, again, an unconventional approach here, guys, when it comes down to it. I mean, I typically don't start the streams or any of these videos with that contextual background, but really wanted to underscore the serious situation that is the Louisiana Delta. Take a look at the current U.S. drought monitor at the moment. This is as of the 31st of October. These are then expected to update later on in the week. Not expecting any additional changes here. We'll take a look at some models here in a moment and see when our next chances of precipitation will be. But we're talking about exceptional drought for Louisiana, even getting back up towards Vicksburg, Mississippi. And even Yazoo City. I mean, this has been a long issue that spanned several of weeks, even going back the last couple of months. And let's actually take a look at that now before we do jump into the models at what's really been going on here in the Gulf. We can start first by just looking at our jet stream at the moment. And as you can see, you have this area of high pressure that sits in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, that hasn't always been the case, right? I mean, we have seen some fluctuations in the ridge throughout the summer. We've had an expansion of the high pressure. We've had a contraction, a back and forth, sort of an accordion sort of motion with that high pressure. But at the moment, and really what we've seen throughout most of the summer, is this high pressure that's sat here in the Gulf. Now, if we know anything about high pressure, we know that it does tend, in the northern hemisphere, to spin clockwise. And with that clockwise motion, that's essentially advecting moisture around from Louisiana, circumventing that, right? So when we have high pressure here that sits in the Gulf, remember, clockwise motion tells us that moisture advection goes through Texas and then hooks back around towards the Midwest. And like I said, we've seen that pretty frequently. And because of that, keep in mind that we have more backed flow that moves into places like Mississippi and Louisiana, bringing more stable and dry conditions as opposed to moist air advection that with a frontal source would actually produce precipitation. So this constant high pressure flux that we've seen in the Gulf of Mexico has actually kept conditions dry and has got us to this point of exceptional drought in places like New Orleans as well as Mississippi, even extending into Alabama. The biggest question, though, is when we talk about El Nino, right? We've seen El Nino strengthen over the last couple of months, and for you folks in the South who have not really seen much precipitation to begin with through most of the summer, a lot of you are looking towards this winter season for more of that rebound to an above-average precipitation regime. I gotta tell you, I mean, if we were to use that historical context, you would be right. A lot of times we do see above average precipitation correlated with El Nino because El Nino typically implies that we have a stronger Pacific jet stream, meaning that our jet flow cuts right through the South and then eventually ejects northeast into New England, the Northeast, and the Mid-Atlantic. That's not to say that we aren't going to have jet fluctuations throughout the winter season, but just from a climatological and a seasonal point of view, it would be safe to say that our precipitation chances should start to increase as we get into December, January, and February. And you should be, I guess, relieved to know that we should be seeing some precipitation chances returning to the region beginning this week. Is it going to eradicate the drought? Absolutely not. But seeing these chances of precip become more and more frequent is a good sign if we're trying to really get out of this drought, this rut that we're in for much of the Gulf Coast states. The current jet stream is a zonal flow, right? So we started the conversation by highlighting this area of high pressure out in the Gulf, and then we have this westerly flow in our mid-levels, right? And this is more so of a zonal flow, bringing above average temperatures for much of the United States, including the Central Plains, back towards the Great Lakes in the south central United States. We've been talking about that over the last few days with some of our videos. Meanwhile, that's actually keeping things rather quiet for much of the country. You notice not a lot of precipitation here. The only exception to the rule would be our shortwave trough that's up towards the upper Great Lakes, and that's bringing a band of showers and even some rumbles of thunder across Detroit as of this afternoon. The secondary area of precipitation is out towards the Pacific Northwest in association with our secondary troughing feature, and that's bringing quite a bit of surface level convergence to promote some precipitation across Seattle, Tacoma, even getting back towards the Idaho and eastern parts of Washington, and also extending into southern Idaho and eastern Oregon. So you might be thinking, well, Brendan, I mean, this pattern doesn't look like there's going to be precipitation chances for areas that really need it, right? Well, wrong. Because what you're going to see on the models is this troughing feature out towards the Pacific Northwest is expected to move southeast and actually dive southeast and then eventually hook to the northeast. This is a good sign if we're looking for precipitation, because what that's going to do is for this high pressure, it's actually going to contract it a bit to where it's going to be a little bit more elongated of a high pressure, and thus advect enough moisture into places like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama to produce some precipitation. So the combination of moist air advection along with a frontal boundary regime and a low pressure system should actually bring our next chance of precipitation to places that, as I said, really need it. Again, it's not going to eradicate the drought, but it's a good sign as we're starting to see more of that become frequent, as opposed to what we saw in the summer where we went several weeks without even seeing rainfall at all. So let's take a look here at Weather Bell. We're going to move on here and take a look at some of our models. And we're going to start first just with our NAM 3 kilometer and see if we can't get a bit of an idea of what we can expect to see precipitation-wise. And actually, before I do that, let's take a look at the GFS, because I know the GFS is going to go as far out as a week to be able to give us some indication of that. So we'll look here at just our overall 500 millibar jet to start, just to show you what I'm talking about as far as the jet stream is concerned. And we're going to look at the wind speed. There we go. And take a look at what happens. So here's our trough out towards the Pacific Northwest that is then expected to dive southeast as we go forward. See, there's our trough right there. Here's our high pressure out towards the Gulf. There is our trough axis off the coast of California. Watch that continue to move east as we get into Thursday, right? And then eventually Friday. That is a wonderful sign. You might not be seeing much here on this map, but you certainly will on the precip totals. This shortwave trough is bringing about nice low-level veering. I know this is a 500 millibar map, but if we were to look at, say, 850 here on this same time slot, look at that. You're getting plenty of low-level veering and a nice moisture advection regime. You also have a frontal boundary here in association with a cold front that's going to help to provide lift and forcing for some of that shower and thunderstorm development across Louisiana and eastern Texas, getting into what would be late Thursday night into Friday morning, and that should continue into Friday afternoon. We'll take a look here at the precipitation reflectivity type just to show you. And again, GFS is a little bit broader of a spatial scale, so it's not going to show us fine details, regarding any sort of intense embedded cells within this line, but what it is going to show us is a pretty broad stratiform shower regime. Look at how it moves through rather quickly, but it's a very large complex. Should bring us quite a bit of rainfall over the next 24 to 48 hours, again, from late Thursday night into Friday afternoon and evening, that eventually moves out of the region, but then we see another chance at some showers and even some thunderstorms getting ever so close to New Orleans and especially eastern Texas. Hey, you guys need it too. I don't want to leave you out of the equation. So certainly a lot of rainfall in the mix going over the next, say, week or so, with our first chance of rain beginning Thursday night, going into Friday, and then we have a secondary, what looks to be a tropical system making its way into the region by the time we get to early next week. If we look at the precipitation totals over that span, this is going to show us quite a bit, right? This is including also the tropical system as well. Let's actually zoom in here to get a little bit closer to the region of concern. We'll go over to the south central United States and look at that, folks. I mean, it's not a lot. We're talking about 3 to 4 inches, and actually I would even say 3 to 5 inches around this area. But keep in mind one thing. This is a lot better than what we saw over the last several weeks prior to the fall season. If we were talking about June, July, and even in August, seeing these type of precipitation totals was incredibly rare to nil. Now, at least over the last few weeks, we've started to see a pickup in frequency of some of our precipitation chances. And like I said, at least according to the GFS, we're seeing anywhere between 3 and even upwards of 7 inches of rainfall for portions of Houston, Texas, which again also need the rainfall. Getting back towards New Orleans, not a lot, but at least in the Mississippi Delta, are starting to see those rainfall chances return anywhere between, say, 3 to 5 inches within sort of this corridor. Let me just go ahead and redraw that for you again. About 3 to 5 inches of rain, according to the GFS. I believe the Euro might be a little bit more conservative with this. Let's take a look and find out. And it's not going out far enough. So I guess what we can do is look at the Euro ensemble and see, and that is a little bit more, actually a lot more conservative with that. But I think the Euro is being a little bit too conservative on the rainfall totals. I am expecting still to see a 3 to 5 inch range. If we also look here at the NAM, I think we should be able to get some sort of inclination. I don't know. We'll see if we can or not. It looks like we don't. We kind of do, but the NAM is also a little bit conservative as well. So the NAM and Euro is showing the rainfall being a little bit more displaced towards the north. But that being said, it's really going to come down to that troughing placement. I would still expect to see that 3 to 5 inch range here in the Gulf, and that's going to be especially true once we advect that Gulf system, that tropical system up towards the north. Not expecting that to be anywhere near a hurricane status. Let's just get that straight. But keep in mind, these rainfall totals, especially for the NAM, are only going out so far. We're not even taking into account the additional rainfall chances that will come. So I don't want you to be downed and depressed by the other models showing much lower totals than that of the GFS. I do still expect, regardless of the spread, to see some returned steady rainfall into the region that desperately needs it by the time we get to late this week. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know down in the comments below what you think will happen here with the Gulf. Any thoughts, and by the way, not even just thoughts. If you have any questions about your area that we didn't talk about in this video, put those in the comments down below. So let me actually wind that back. If you have any thoughts about what will happen with New Orleans, feel free to post those. Love to hear your opinions on that. But also, if you have any questions about your location for weather, going through the rest of the week, we got a lot to talk about there. Feel free to post those in the comments below, and I will be sure to answer all your questions in a timely manner. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next video. Take care.